The line stretches all the way back, perhaps to God or to gods. We remember our ancestors because they are too easy to forget. But we are not the first to suffer, rebel, fight, love, and die. The grace with which we embrace life, in spite of the pain and the sorrows, is always a measure of what has gone before. And I knew early on that I would use this particular reading because it succinctly articulates some of what I'm attempting to share with you today. For centuries, people have told stories, celebrated life, and approached the ultimate while gathered around a fire. Today, we light this chalice, that the hearth fire of our hearts may be rekindled, that our stories may be retold, that we might celebrate life anew, and that we might approach what is of ultimate value together here with each other. Now please join me standing as you're able, singing our opening hymn, number 360. We have gathered. Let's sing all three verses. Now it's time for your affirmation. It's printed in your order of service, and it's also on the wall behind me. Let's repeat it together. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its gift. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Please be seated. This is the time in your service where we build community by sharing any joy, sorrow, or concern that rests on your hearts. If you have something you'd like to share, please come forward, state your name, light a candle, and briefly share your joy, sorrow, or concern. Please speak directly.
I'm Steve. This is a candle of sadness. One of my neighbors on the 7th floor of Gulf Breeze passed about 3 days ago. Apparently, according to his wife, his name was Earl, and his wife's name was Carolyn, and he was having heart trouble, and he passed about 3 days ago. I wasn't, very close friends with him, but I knew him because he lived on my floor. And so anyway, this is a candle of sadness.
My name is Judy, and I have a candle of joy. For Thanksgiving, I was going up to my grandson's, who lives in Conroe. It's an hour-and-a-half drive for me. I get on the highway on 45, and all of a sudden, this warning light comes up on my dashboard, and my tires are going down. And one of them is going down. Thought, I got to get off of this freeway and find a place to help me. And so I got off, got to a gas station. I went inside the desk, and there was a couple standing there, and I said, I need help. I have a flat tire. And the husband said, let's go. This couple changed my tire for me. So I was able to get back on the road, and then I stopped again because I wanted to make sure that the tires weren't going down because nothing was coming up. And a man helped me at that place, and everything was okay with the tires. So I continued on to Conroe. My son was able to fix my tire. He has one of those little kits. I didn't know they had those, but he was able to do that, put it back on the thing. So I'm thankful that I made it.
I'm Shirley, and this is a candle of concern. I don't know how many of you read the front page of the Galveston paper this weekend. This man who has I don't know if he wasn't born here, he was brought here when he was a young child from the Honduras, has lived in Galveston for 30 years, went to the DMV to get something licensed, something renewed. The clerk said, "Are you a citizen?" He rightfully said, "I don't have to answer that," and he left. The deputies came out, arrested him. He is now in a detention facility in California. This stuff has got to stop.
Hi, I'm Linda again. This is a candle of joy. I have a girlfriend having a birthday today. I've known her since 1992 and worked with her for a number of years before we retired. This is a candle of concern, and this is a candle because our president, unfortunately, body shames people. And as a large-sized woman all of my life, I never experienced that in my family. I didn't have bullying. And for a man in his position to do that to women journalists because of their size, he doesn't do it to men, but he does it to women. People need to stand up in regard to what he is saying, how inappropriate he is. I think the man has dementia, very honestly, but we are in a world of hurt with what his comments are. Mitch?
Hi, I'm Mitch. I have a small joy and a concern. we were at the Thanksgiving dinner today, and somebody had a can of cranberry sauces. So we went rummaging through all the utensil drawers under the table there, and we found 4 corkscrews and no can opener. So I'm going to take it on myself to go buy us a can opener. The concern was, I was thinking about all the things I was thankful and grateful for that month. And so just on a whim, I Googled how many people on this planet live on less than $10 a day. It was 52%. So I light a candle for us. We are lucky.
I'm going to try not to let my ADHD run away with me, but I have lighting one candle for several moments of gratitude. I'm glad I made it in today. And gathering is one of my favorite ceremonies that we have here. It always gives me great hope to see new Unitarians and pacifists and advocates stepping into their own, no matter where they are in their life's journey. So I was very happy that I made it in today. I've been coming here for 43 years, and I have traveled and attended so many different congregations and fellowships, and this has always been the one that's home. As my family faced an emergency, y'all embraced us last week and supported us through it. And that just brought and solidified that feeling of home so much to us. And so I want to thank you for helping us through that time. We didn't know if we were going to lose Corbin or not on Friday. And since then, we have completely had a turnaround in his health and in the situation of our home and being able to have a safe home. We had black mold. I don't know if everybody knows that or not. We had a severe black mold infestation in our subfloors, and a leak came through, and Corbin immediately, upon exposure, ended up in the hospital due to it. So thank you for reaching out and for helping us hold the fort down for my family. We appreciate that so much. The last thing I have is a joy. I have been working a lot with the Burnett school community. We are the only elementary school on the island that has an autism program. We have a very large amount of students that are either houseless or in transition to new housing. And as a result, I've been working with the West End Happy Lions Club and with some of our educators. And we're doing really awesome things to feed a lot of our families. We're donating 25 meal kits a week to families that are in need. That's been kind of awesome to see coming together. We're hosting community nights, which is something that I learned growing up in this church, that when times are hard, when you're feeling oppressed, when you're feeling down, the best way to fight back is to come together as a community and to feed one another, to listen to one another, and to advocate for one another. So thank you for raising me like that. Sorry, that was long.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rachel. This is a candle of appreciation and hope. This morning when I came in, Catherine shared with me in excitement that we have reached 40% of our goal in our Faithify campaign. And it occurred to me, I've been your treasurer now for 1.5 years. I did not really appreciate the kind of details that the day-to-day operations of even an organization of our size, the number of things that occur. And your board is very cognizant of this. So the fact that we could continue and hopefully make our goal on this campaign so we could have someone help with the day-to-day activities will allow the rest of us to focus on all the missions that we do focus on. So I'm just cheerleading for our Faith If I campaign, and thanks to everyone who've contributed. And I actually have reached out to my family and friends. I can't tell you when was the last time I did that. And so maybe that was one of them. So, but here's to us continuing with progress in that campaign. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Sharon, and that's very loud. This is a candle of remembrance for my mother, who died the day after after Thanksgiving in 1993. I don't know why it does one time. Just hold it there long enough. Yay! So Thanksgiving was wonderful. I had it here. We had a wonderful dinner, wonderful people. It was joyous, but always in my mind is that was the last time I saw my mother. It was a Thanksgiving Day in 1993.
Hi, I'm Lodi, and this is a candle of great joy. Also, I am sorry that I had to miss the Thanksgiving dinner here at church. It looks like it was wonderful, but I was able to be with my children and my grandson, and the Cowboys won, and the Longhorns won, and my grandson goes to Alabama, and Alabama won. So it was a wonderful weekend.
I'll light one final candle for all those joys and concerns unspoken. Our connections our time for this simple story reflects. Next, as a species, the only way we can individually survive is in cooperation with others, in community. And diversity is actually one of the keys to our survival. Initially, those others were our parents, and then later, all the different people who make up our support networks throughout our lives. And lastly, we must rest every day. It's crucial, and we're hardwired to need it. Rest not only allows for bodily recuperation, it helps us think clearly, all of which is necessary to manage our ongoing survival needs. Survival is essential, and we do that best in a diverse community, one that works together and which knows that rest and reflection help us live together longer. The first aspect I'll explore is our ongoing survival as a species, and our challenges to that survival have drastically changed. It's become obvious when we compare our current survival rates with historic ones. We take survival for granted, something our ancestors never had the luxury of doing. For most of humanity's evolutionary history, about 300,000 years, we were nomadic hunter-gatherers, barely surviving, existing from one meal to the next. Evolution is constantly happening, but we don't notice anything in our particular lives. Beneficial evolutionary characteristics took thousands of years to come about, and our genetic programming focused mainly on survival, simply because survival was always problematic. The urge to survive has been programmed into us. Pulitzer Prize-winning author Ernest Becker says, "Early people who were the most afraid were those who were realistic about their situation in nature, which was dire. And they passed on to their offspring that same realism, and it had a high survival value." In support of these ideas about survival, for the vast majority of the last 300,000 years, up until about 1840, the average life expectancy was less than 35 years of age. Yes, less than 35 years of age. Now, just to be clear, prior to 1840, many people lived into their 40s, 50s, 60s, and even older. But far more people died at earlier ages. Once again, the innate fear passed down had a high survival value, especially in a world where death was common and actual survival was in doubt. We simply can't relate to that much death at earlier ages. Using myself as an example, my mother only had 2 children. Both of us were born in the 50s, and my sister and I are still very much alive. Infant mortality used to be far greater than it is today. Throughout my early years, prior to reaching 35, I only recall 1 friend and 2 second cousins who died in their teens. 2 were by auto accidents and 1 committed suicide. Auto accidents weren't a risk for most of history. When I was in the 7th grade, I skinned both of my knees badly, and I developed a terrible infection. Without antibiotics, which was the case for most of history, I could have died. But with 6 penicillin shots, I got to keep on living. Before I reached the age of 35, I actually lived through 2 different epidemics. First, I survived the polio epidemic, which I barely remember. And later, I survived AIDS, which killed dozens of my friends, but I avoided it as well. So by the time I reached 35, less than 1% of the people I knew, my age or younger, had died. And overall life expectancy was more than 70 years of age, and nowhere near the 35 years of age it was prior to 1840, and for most of human history. So yes, we take survival for granted, primarily because of wonderful advances in medical technology. But for hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors constantly faced death, and survival was always on their minds. Even so, our biological urge to survive remains dominant. Unfortunately, that ingrained urge to survive is strong and 300,000 years of genetic programming have made it a useful characteristic to exploit. Less than scrupulous people often tap into the fear associated with it and manipulate people who accept their lies. Here are a few examples. Illegal aliens are taking away our jobs, our very means of survival. No, they aren't. That's a lie, a distortion of actual reality. Trans people are preying on children in restrooms. No, they're not. That's absurd and a lie. Abortion is killing babies. No, abortion is not killing babies. It is preventing embryos from becoming babies, and that's a big difference. So that's a lie. And lastly, they're coming for our guns, our means of protecting ourselves and our loved ones. No, that's a lie as well. All of these arguments are vast distortions of reality, but the lies somehow ignite the survival instinct in some people, and the lies become the gospel truth for those who believe the lies. And speaking of gospel, perhaps Jesus' most enduring parable was about survival. The Good Samaritan helped an injured man live, and Jesus told his followers to do the same, help others live. And we must continue to help others live, because there are real problems in life. People go to bed hungry, and many don't know where their next meal is coming from. Healthcare doesn't exist for everyone or is so expensive that they can't afford it. And many people have jobs, but the jobs don't pay a living wage, with an emphasis on living. Yes, our need to survive is hardwired into us, but it's up to each of us to discern the truths about our actual survival. And one place we can broadcast those truths is right here in our own religious communities, doing what they've always done, helping people survive and live. In the last 5,000 or 6,000 years, one of the ways communities dealt with the constant reality of death and survival was through the creation of religions. The collective wisdom shared in the various religious traditions and in sacred texts was created through the lens of simply trying to survive. Thus, a major purpose of religion was to help people deal with all the realities of life. Religion can still help us do that if we can somehow refocus that wisdom on actual truth. The next aspect of life I want to explore is how we survived for all those thousands of years. We survived because as a species, we learned early on we had to work together in small groups we now call communities. And the more diverse the community, the better the chance of our collective survival. Our earliest communities were small, made up of maybe 50 individuals. Much larger communities didn't come into being until relatively recently, in the last 10 or 15,000 years. That may sound like a long time, but remember, we've been around as a species for about 300,000 years. Those smaller communities provided sufficient diversity for us to survive, not thrive, simply survive. Thriving as a species only came about in the last few thousand years. But for hundreds of thousands of years, a typical community would have been made up of several family units with similar numbers of men and women, many children, and adolescents, and the elderly, people over 35 or 45 years of age. And everyone would have shared in doing anything they were capable of learning and doing. Extreme specialization, like we're used to today, didn't exist. As a species, we survived because we worked together. The hunters weren't always successful, so they relied on the gatherers, and the roles were constantly changing. A young child might be a future hunter, but was raised and protected by the gatherers. And as hunters aged out or were injured, they took on other roles. Their flexibility and the diversity were key to the group's overall survival. All the basics were necessary to survive, and the basics included finding sufficient food and clean water, finding energy sources for both protection and cooking, and lastly, disposing of waste. Today, we take those basics for granted. None of us look for food except in a grocery store. None of us get water from a creek or even a well. None of us gather sticks to burn and cook with or to keep warm. And none of us dispose of our waste. And by waste, I'll be blunt. Our toilets are luxuries we take for granted. For most of history, our ancestors had nothing remotely similar. In fact, we actually panic when our toilets stop up because we don't want to deal with it. None of us manage any of these essentials for ourselves. But for early communities, individual members dealt with each of those basic needs every day. Diversity was actually key to survival, and diversity is simply a part of the natural world. There's actually a 5,500 rule for species. 50 individuals are needed to avoid inbreeding, and 500 to avoid genetic drift. Diversity in a community ensured that procreation remained viable and also that someone would always be available to help with each of the basics I've just described. Imagine returning with fresh game you just killed. It was raining and there was no dry wood in the cave to cook the meat, so the meat spoiled. That's not a recipe for survival. Diversity is actually key to an ecosystem's health, and we now call that biodiversity. Even our guts require a wide variety of microorganisms, including bacteria, fungi, and viruses that live in our digestive tracts and keep us healthy. Diversity also ensured more minds were available to help solve unanticipated problems. Not every problem can be solved with brute force. Recently, diverse thinkers realized there was something problematic with dirty hands, which often led to infections and death. Washing hands began to save lives. Diverse thinkers realized there was a link between fleas and disease during the bubonic plague era. Outbreaks of the plague were minimized by pest control and better sanitation. Yes, countless lives have been saved because of good hygiene, better sanitation practices, and clean water. So because of diverse thinking, we have been able to solve more of our problems, resulting in much longer average lifespans that we now enjoy and expect. In reality, we have always depended on each other to survive, and we still do. The myth of individualism is a modern myth. We depend on each other in community more than we want to admit or realize, and I believe we've mostly lost that perspective. Once again, our religious communities can remind us of our connections, the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part. The final aspect of life I want to explore is our need to rest. For most of history, and because days are cyclical, everyone was constantly pausing and resting around a campfire, used for both cooking and protection. When they rested, they reflected on what was working and what wasn't working, and on how they could better survive as a group the next day. Not for the next 20 years, just the next day, because survival was that precarious. And that's how humanity genetically evolved for hundreds of thousands of years. In fact, our bodies need rest every day and recuperate from daily exertions. Recently, my knee was giving me trouble, and since we have a 2-story home, I was dreading the next few days. But that night I slept well, and my knee was better in the morning because I had rested. Rest allows our bodies times to heal, and our minds also benefit from rest. When we're tired, we often make mistakes we wouldn't normally make. There have been countless car accidents where the driver fell asleep at the wheel. For thousands of years, at the end of the day, and likely around a fire and a shared meal, the community probably reflected on what was happening in their particular community. They likely celebrated new births, which meant the community would live on, and they mourned those who had died, either naturally or through some mishap. Both of those types of events would have been constant reminders of how fragile life actually was. They may have celebrated new partnerships we now call marriages, and other meaningful events like successful hunts or finding some unexpected source of food. And they probably shared their collective wisdom with each other on how to survive. This collective sharing, celebrating, and mourning around a fire may be where religion first got its start, or at least some aspects of religion we still hold on to today. Some of us call this a worship service. The word worship comes from the word worth or worthy. And originally, worship meant to consider things of worth. Sharing something of worth or some wisdom is the main focus of most worship services. And the ancient Jewish people recognized the need for rest, and they codified it in their creation myth. God worked for 6 days, and he rested on the 7th day. That community realized that daily rest simply wasn't enough. So they created a myth that required a full day of rest every week. Like it or not, many of us are somewhat compulsive, and we don't know when to stop and rest. I'm sure the need to survive also drove some people to limit what rest they got, because they were constantly struggling to survive. So the Jewish community created something they called the Sabbath to remind everyone weekly what was truly important in life, and they took a whole day off to recognize. At the start of each of their weekly Sabbath celebrations, they began with 3 blessings. The first reminder was a reminder that the Sabbath celebration was a holy time, that life itself is sacred and shouldn't be taken for granted. In the Sabbath ritual, candles are lit to mark the start of holy time. Because of their constant need to survive, they knew life was precious, even holy, and the first blessing of the Sabbath made that fact clear. Life is precious and holy. The second blessing was a reminder that life is only possible because of community, and that we love and appreciate everyone in community who makes life possible. That was symbolized by sharing wine or grape juice with others in the community. The last of the three blessings was the sharing of challah bread, which was a sign of gratitude for their connection to the earth and gratitude for the earth's bounty. Rest, ritualized by the Sabbath celebration and by taking an entire day off every week, provided a real opportunity to stop, rest, reflect, and remember all the connections that make life possible. Wise people down through the centuries have realized these truths. For example, Gandhi knew the importance of rest. Even during the most turbulent years when he was dismantling the British Empire, Gandhi spent one day a week in silence. He meditated so that he could act from the principles of interdependence, not bringing harm to himself nor another. So, whether you celebrate the Sabbath, Sunday services, or take some frequent time off where you consciously stop and rest, it isn't important what you call it, but that you do it and that you rest. And while you rest, reflect on what makes your life possible, those others who help make your life possible, and remember exactly what makes your life worth living. This is the only life you will ever have. Don't take it for granted and don't forget. Life is precious and life is holy. Amen and namaste. Now please